Hello Stampers, my name is Linda Bedinger and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. And today I'd like to show you how I made this card. I'm starting a series of interesting and kind of different folds. And this is my first one. And I'm going to try and do a couple of these a month for a while and sort of do a series of them like I do my Fast and Beautifuls, so that we'll have one of these kinds of fun folds in the lineup for some of the videos that I do. This one we did in a card class today, and then I'm doing this one with my team next week. And so I thought I would show you what I did to make this card. And let me show you the pieces that you need to make this card. There's a few changes from the original prototype here to what we're going to do today. What we need to make this card is I have a base here that's 8.5 by 5.5 scored and folded at 4 1/4. Then I have a piece of black that is 4 by 5 1/4. And then I have this pretty pattern paper from the Petal Palette suite. And it's good to have papers that have good contrast on them. I'll show you one that got made with my prototype with some retired paper here in a minute. But this measures 4 inches by 4 inches. Then we need a piece of ribbon that measures about 5.5 inches to go around our card here. Then another piece of this pattern paper here, and this piece measures 3 inches by, looks like 1 1/4, and then this piece is 1 inch by 2 3/4. Then this little piece here is 2 3/4 inches square. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to make this fold. So what we're going to do is use this pattern paper, and all we need is a ruler and a pencil. And there's certainly ways you can do this on your scoreboard. But what I found was that it's almost easier to do it by hand to get a good fold on this thing. So what I'm doing is I'm lining up my paper so that the bottom and top point here on the corners line up on my grid paper so that I know that my line will be absolutely straight. Then I'm going to put my ruler here so that I can span that area, and I'm going to use a pencil to just make a faint line. Well, if I had a point on my pencil, we could make a faint line. Let me try that. Okay, so we're going to make a line from that point to this so that it's absolutely right on that on that line. So I'm going to turn it the other way now and do exactly the same thing. And we are getting lines to guide us with the fold, and we are also finding dead center on this panel. And so there's my faint line on that side, and so there we have the crisscross lines. I think you might be able to see that on the paper. And so I've got dead center. So what we're going to do is take each of these points and bring it up to the center, and then I'm going to gently use my bone folder here to burnish that fold. Then I'm going to go to the next one and go to that center piece and make sure that it lines up right next to this other piece that I have here, and getting as close to a straight line there and getting as close to that center point as I can, and then burnishing that fold. And I'm going to work my way right around the card here, making sure that I've got those folds as tight as I can, because when you don't, you end up with a corner that looks like this one. And while it's probably okay, it's not my choice for how I'd like this to look in the end. So I want to try and get absolutely nice tight corners. So there we are on that one. And then final one here should line up with everything else and give us some pretty good lines here. And so there we have all four corners, and it's easier to go around and line it up next to the other one than to go across and then go across. So I would encourage you to do the first one, get it exactly the way you want it, and then go on around the paper to get this pretty little fold. And I've got nice tight corners here on all four sides. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is measure here about a 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to put a little tick mark right in the center here at about a 1/2 inch. And what I'm going to do is fold that, and I'm going to line this up again along here so that I'm lined up on that same line that I was before, so that when I fold this back, I want to fold at that 1 inch or 1/2 inch line and come right back down to that point and get a nice little fold. And I'm doing that with my nail here, and you can use your bone folder, and you don't want to press too hard because you don't want to split the paper, but I'm pretty sure that that's about right. Then I'm going to flip it around and do the same thing. I'm going to measure from the back side here up about a 1/2 inch, put a little tick mark. So now the other thing you could do is to line this up on your grid paper here, another way to do this, and put your ruler across on that tick mark, and you can measure right on your grid paper that it's even. Then you can take this piece and fold it up and back, and your line that you've drawn should be exactly straight, and that will do exactly the same thing. And so now I've got, see, these points are meeting nicely here. So I'm going to continue on around this and make my marks here and fold my paper, and I'll be back in a flash. There we go. Now I've got my folds made, and each of these corners is nice and tight, and these little folds basically meet at the same points all the way around my square. Okay, now I'm going to erase my little pencil marks on this outside flap. On the interior it doesn't matter because all of that's going to be covered up. And this is a fold that I've always been very fond of, and so it's kind of fun to be able to use it. And you may have seen it around in the past and done with different by different people, and it's just one of my very favorites. So there we go, and I'm going to show you how to secure that down, but first we need to do a little bit of stamping. So what I'm using in the way of stamps is I've got a happy birthday, and it could say anything here. Birthday, thank you, anniversary, it could be just about anything. So I've selected a happy birthday that I'm kind of fond of. And then these two stamps are from Best Birds. And I'm using this rather large bird and then this little flower with a stem on it here. And I'm using my Memento ink. And the thing to remember when you're stamping your focal point for the interior, and it certainly doesn't have to be a bird, it can be a floral thing, it can be any kind of stamp that you kind of like, that you would like to show off in this space here. I kind of like the idea of the bird, and I'm going to bring in my Pierce mat here. And because this is photopolymer. And you've got to keep in mind that this is going to fit inside this little square that we just made. And so you're going to lose a good 1/2 inch on all 4 sides. So very important to get your bird or whatever it is you're doing. And in this case, I'm going to come down about 1/2 inch and in here about 1/2 inch. I don't care too much about his tail or his feet. And so I'm going to put this right about here and see if we can get a nice image of our bird here. I'm going to let that sit for just a second. And there we've got a nice image of our bird. Now this little flower, the first time I did it, and on this, I managed to get the flowers where you could actually see them. And in order to get the flowers in here so you can see them, the flowers need to be just right along the back of our little bird here. Because if you tuck it too far in the corner, it's going to be tucked underneath here and you won't see it. So I'm going to put one of these flowers, and I'm putting them very near the back of this bird. And there's one, and I'm going to put another one right down here, and again real close to the bird so I can make sure that we see them. Now I will say this, in experimenting around with this, I put one bird, and I loved the stamped image that I had, but my bird was in such a shape that he got hidden a little bit under here. Well, I took it out and I just trimmed this edge, because you're going to have such a margin around here that's hidden. If you make a mistake, it's real easy to trim and kind of get everything centered again. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now there's that stamp, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp my happy birthday. I'm in the mood for lots of happy birthday stamps because I have a bunch of cards I need to send. And so on this one, and I'll put on the screen what stamp set this is from, but this is one of those stamps, and I'll bring it up here so you can see. When the happy birthday is square, the happy is square, the birthday isn't. So I've chosen to square things up on the happy and let the birthday just kind of happen. So I'm going to set that over to one side here and get my happy straight. And the birthday, once you do that, kind of goes away a little bit to one side. And if you don't get a perfect stamp, now you could do this on the Stamparatus, but if you don't get a perfect stamp, then using a black marker pen will fill in anything that you're kind of missing on that. Okay, so no, I'm not done. I have one more thing to stamp. What I did on this one, I used alcohol markers to color in to get that vibrant color. And I did it on the inside and then realized that it bled through because they're alcohol markers. So on the one for this one, what I've done is made a long strip here. Okay, I switched my stamp to a much smaller block because I found I was getting ink around the edges. So this is a second try for me. So I'm going to ink this up, and I'm going to put these little flowers on this strip, coming down from the top and coming in from the side and in from the other side, and just randomly getting a bunch of these little flowers down this strip. Some of them actually go off the page, and that's okay too. And one last one right there. Okay, so now I think that's all of the stamping I need to do, so I can put my ink away. So we have these stamped pieces along with my happy birthday here, and we're just about ready. Now I have a little bit of coloring to do, and so what I'm going to do is let me grab a little scratch paper here. And one of the things I got on stage was this marker, and it's one of the new colors. This one is called Light Lovely Lipstick, and it's one of the new colors that we're going to have. And so I thought since I had it, it would be fun to use that. I'm using that and a light old olive blender pen here, and I'm just going to color in these little flowers. And there is nothing special about this coloring. I am no shading, no messing around. I'm just putting some color down on this, on these flowers that I have here. And so I'll do one there so you can see what it is I'm doing. And then I'm using the old olive here, the light old olive on the green stems. And I'll speed this up so that it's not so tedious to watch. Okay, there's my coloring done insofar as I've gotten. The other thing I did was I used Berry Burst, because that's the ribbon that we're using here, and I put a little bit of ink on the lid of the stamp pad here, and I've got my aqua painter, and I decided to add a little bit of color to the bird himself, just because he's so plain black and white. I thought a little bit of color, and I'm putting a little bit of color right on the top of his head and down some of these feathers. And then I added a little bit just along his breast here. I thought that added a little bit of interest. I think I will put a little bit of yellow, and I'm going on his beak, and I'm using a watercolor pencil to do that, just to add a little color to his beak. There we go. Okay. All right. Now I think I can put this away as well. And I think we are ready to put this card together. So really, once you get your pieces colored and this fold done, it's a pretty fast little card. Then we have some embellishments to do. But I think the first thing I'm going to do is put my bird inside my thing here, and then I'll show you how to put in the dimensionals to hold this down. And what I did was, if you take a look at this dimensional, and I'll just bring it up here so you can see, there is a flat side if they're six-sided. So there's a flat side on for every edge, there's a parallel edge. And what I did was I put this little dimensional right in here in that ½ inch area. That's why that needs to be roughly a ½ inch, with a flat end at the top and a flat end against the folds, so that I have flat ends against both folds. And I put one on the side, and then I came down on this side and I put one on this side. And I can see from doing this that my bird and my flowers are going to show just fine. So now I can add just a little bit of adhesive. You don't need much to hold this in place because everything else is holding it in place as well. But this way, now, then I'm going to, and I'll show you one of these, and then I'll move the video along as I do the rest. So now I'm going to just fold this down here to hold that in place on the card. Then I'm going to take another dimensional, and I'm going to be very mindful again about those flat edges. And since I've got dimensionals on this side here, this and this side, I'm going to put this one right in the middle along that same 1/2 inch strip, but on the outside. And then I'm going to fold this back here, and that is going to hold that perfectly in place and still give that raised look here to the inside of the panel. Okay, I'll move the video along while I put the rest of these in place. Okay, so now I have my bird just inside this little frame. Isn't that pretty? I just think this is such a pretty fold, and I love the color combinations here. And then I know that this is going to fit here, and what I've got to be mindful of is that this little point doesn't go much beyond the top edge of this black, because I have only a small margin and I want this to fit in my envelope without any trouble. So I know that that's going to be put right about there. And the next thing for me to get put in place is my ribbon before I put this thing together. And now's the time to put on your ribbon before you put your panel down. So I'm knowing that that's going to go right in about there. I'm going to set this ribbon right across there on my panel and secure that on the back. And now I've got a good spot for my bird to fit here. And now then, I'm going to use this panel down here, which mirrors some of the pattern paper here, and set my happy birthday down here. And so I'm going to put this piece on this pattern paper. And then I'm going to raise this piece up on dimensionals. Okay, now I can center this piece right down here on this panel, leaving the margin that I want between the ribbon and the end of the page. Now then, this I'm not going to put up on dimensionals. I'm just going to add some snail here and lay this down flat, because there's so much going on with the frame and the dimensionals that are here. I don't think it needs any more lift. So then I'm going to place this here, get that right where I want it, put that in place, and then I'm going to go ahead and put this on my card front here. And again, I'm just going to use snail. It's got a lot of dimension on the front, but if I'm just putting the snail on the edges, it looks like it works just fine. So now I'm going to place this here. There we go. There's our card front just about done. Then on the inside, I'm going to put this little panel that we colored down one side here with a little bit of a margin top and bottom and along the edge. And I think that makes for pretty little decoration on the inside. Then what I did was I took some rhinestones and my my alcohol marker here, and I colored in some of the rhinestones. And I'm using the largest and a couple of the medium rhinestones here. And this is always, you want to color this in the while it's still sitting on its packaging. Any mess that you make will be made here. Okay, I'm going to take the largest of the rhinestones and put it right here. Then I'm going to take one of these little pink rhinestones and I'm going to put it in the center of my flower. I'm going to do that on a couple of these. And then I'm going to randomly place a couple more of these rhinestones around on the card. And you know, this last one I might just put right down here on the ribbon itself. So there I go. I've got all of my decoration on the front of the card. And that is pretty much the project for today. So let me move these things out of the way. And you can see this one is much more orderly, it feels like it to me, than this one. Again, this was my prototype, so I was experimenting, and this really bothered me, this open corner. But this one's got nice tight corners all the way around, and the frame perfectly frames my little image on the inside. Then we've got our decoration on the inside without anything bleeding through the back. And so there we go. There's our little, and I don't know what this fold is called, but it's a raised frame from my perspective. And so that's probably what I'll call it, just a fun fold raised frame card that's a happy birthday card. And so that is the project for the day. I want to say thank you so much for stopping by my YouTube channel today. I do so appreciate it. And if you don't already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I'd love to be your demonstrator. Anything that's here, you can order from my shop, my 24/7 shop, www.lbedinger.stampinup.net. And Petal Palette paper is going to be available through the end of May, and then it will be retired. The stamp set, Petal Palette, and Best Birds, I think, made it to the new catalog. But in the meanwhile, between now and May 31st, this all is available for order on my website. And if you, like I said, if you don't have a demonstrator, I'd love to be your demonstrator, or you could join my team. Right now, because we've just passed a quarter end, your minimums for the first quarter is your first full quarter, and the first full quarter won't be until September, and then that gets you through year end. So it's a pretty good time to join right after a quarter end. And so that's it for me today. I'll be back soon with more cards and more projects. Bye.